Hello, everyone. I am Otto Tony Graham. I am the digital cinema manager at AMC Century City 15. And on behalf of my fellow members of Film Roll Lead, we want to welcome and thank you to tuning in to our latest installment of our speaker series, Lead Like a Boss. As Women's History Month concludes, we are excited to bring you this panel highlighting some remarkable women in our industry. We guarantee that this discussion will be encouraging and enlightening, not for only women in this particular field, but for working women everywhere. I myself, a product of a single mother household and having a younger sister, have witnessed the strength, will, and determination women possess to make space in any environment they are in and become a boss. And at the end of this discussion, you will too. Reminder that this is being recorded, and if you want any questions to be read at the end of the event, please put them in the chat. Our moderator for tonight is Cineplex's Director of Theatrical Releasing Film Entertainment, Gurbani Marwah. Wielding a Bachelor's of Arts and thesis in Film Theory and Philosophy from McGill University, she wears many hats with Cineplex. She is a film buyer. She is a programmer. She is also responsible for theatrical promotion and film strategies. She is Cineplex's brand manager. She also sits on many boards, such as Film Row, the Crows Theater, the Canadian Pictures Pioneers, the Membership Committee, and the Young Members for the National Association of Theater Owners, and the first position patrons of the National Ballet School of Canada. Needless to say, she is booked and busy, and we are very thankful for her time. Now, thank you all again for tuning in, and now I will turn it over to Gurbani.
Thank you so much, Tony. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very, very excited about today's discussion. There's lots of things to cover. So first off, as Tony said, I'm Gurbani Marwah. I'm the Director of Theatrical Releasing for Cineplex Entertainment up in Chile, Canada. It actually snowed today, which is never a good thing. But I wanted to introduce our panelists and everyone that you're here to see speak. So first off, we have Heather Morgan, Chief Staff and Strategy at Alamo Drafthouse on day 4, I believe, of a new gig. Heather has been an executive in the exhibition industry for over 10 years, holds a PhD in industrial organizational psychology, and most recently became the first female president of the Will Rogers Motion Pictures Pioneer Foundation. We also have Lisa Bunnell, President of Theatrical Distribution for Focus Features, a longtime advocate for the arts and independent film. Lisa oversees all domestic and theatrical release plans and bookings for Focus Features. She has been responsible for the distribution of the Academy Award-winning films such as Phantom Thread, The Darkest Hour, Black Klansman, Promising Young Woman, amongst many, many others. We also have Nikkole Denson-Randolph, SVP of Content Strategy and Inclusive Programming at AMC. In her current position, Nikkole oversees the strategic development, implementation, and promotional planning of AMC's programming efforts and initiatives to include digital content, film, alternative content, and live events. And we also have Mabel Tam, SVP Head Film Buyer at Landmark Theaters. Mabel is a 21-year veteran of the entertainment industry and oversees programming and buying for strategies for their entire circuit. So welcome, everybody. I'm very, very excited to have you all with us. I feel like I'm in the presence of some grade A talent here and some very badass women, so I'm very, very excited. So for everyone who's tuning in, we have a couple topics to cover, and I'm hoping we'll get through everything, but I just want to I'll stop talking, but I just kind of wanted to throw it out to whoever wants to answer first. But leading by example, I mean, one of the main parts of today's discussion is really about the importance of mentorship and having women in executive leadership. So leading by example is obviously the greatest way for women to show their ability, but I wanted to dig into a bit of why that's so important in today's world. And so I wanted to see if each of you would maybe touch on how you saw your career when you started out versus how you see yourself now in a leadership role. I don't know who wants to go first, and maybe I'll throw to Heather, just since you're the first person on my screen.
Perfect priority order. Let's see. I think a short answer is that it's so important for women to lead by example, because when you have a small number of any group, and this can go for any gender or any ethnicity, any member of a limitedly represented group, they shine a brighter light than when you're a member of the majority. So if you're one of very few females, for example, in a position of leadership, then not only is how you conduct yourself kind of reflected on the gender as a whole, but also you're one of the few examples that other members of your group have to look to. So I didn't necessarily aspire to a career in the entertainment industry, but as I started to go down that path, every strong female leader I encountered who was, forging her own way and demonstrating strong areas of success and willing to mentor me, it led to me wanting to stay in this industry and foster my career. And I think we have the opportunity to do that for others as well.
Anyone else?
Jump in. I would add just on top of that, because I think what Heather shared is immensely important. Everyone kind of starts maybe thinking about things one way or exploring one area. I went to law school. I thought I was going to practice civil rights. Go figure. In terms of my path here, very untraditional. But when I was in law school, I looked around the room and I didn't really see very many of people who looked like me. And then along the path, I would gravitate toward women or women of color that I knew I could have certain conversations with, understand what their experiences are, or just admire from afar and understand like, oh, there's a path to that. So leading by example, very often, I also want to say, I don't ever really think about like, I want to be a leader. That was never like the goal, but your actions speak. Right. And I know that's a kind of an overused phrase or term, but actions speak, and people you don't even know are watching, listening, learning are there always. So the way you walk, the way you talk, the way you move, things you do, and folks are watching, and so have we. We've watched others. And I think along the path, those experiences have helped to kind of indicate or shape our own paths.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that, when you start out, I know I don't know if any of us ever said, gee, I want to be in the movie industry when we were going to school, or when we, I know I certainly didn't. My background was in fashion, and, I took a job at Lowe's because I wanted to see U2 Rattle and Hum, the premiere, and I knew they were going to do it at the Astor Plaza. So that's why I did it. So that's a really great, but look at spiritually, that's what happened for me. And that's what I did. And, when I started in the industry, there were very few women, and there were certainly no women film buyers. So, for me, it was just, if you bust your ass every day and you take the time to learn what everybody else is doing, and you really want to do it, and you prove that you could do it, to me, that's the best thing you can do. You never ask anybody else to do something that you wouldn't do or that you haven't done. And you should be able to do everything that everybody that works with you or for you can do. And I think it's really important to lead by example, and to just basically just treat everybody how you'd want to be treated. If you do that, to me, good things will come.
Well, I think these ladies said it all. I mean, that's really my philosophy. I think for me, what you see from me is what you get. This is who I am. This is how I am at home. You can ask my husband and child that. But yeah, I mean, from my own experience, I didn't work in a theater, no idea about the film industry. I just wanted to see movies, really talk about movies, and hey, they still pay me and to talk about movies now. So I think it's just a natural progression as you're going through the years, what makes sense, and just staying true to yourself. I mean, I can't think of anything more important than that.
And I would love to touch, I think all four of you touched on it slightly, but just on things that you, I guess, wish that people maybe knew about women, not just in our industry, but in roles of leadership. I feel like we're the unsung heroes, if you will, because to your point, I think we all work in male-dominated areas, myself included. And so are there things that you wish that people knew more about women in the workplace and in sort of sense of leadership, and specifically in our industry?
I think it's really important that people understand that you don't need to be a bitch, excuse my expression, to be a leader in the industry as a woman. I think there's this like, I have to be really tough. No, you can be yourself. And anybody that, in my opinion, men, women, if you are yourself, and Mabel just said it, it's like, if you are who you really are, if you're your true self, then it'll come through, and it'll be something that'll be effective across the board. I think, unfortunately, sometimes even portrayed in movies or on TV, it's like, women have to be stoic. They have to be like, no, you have to be yourself. If you're yourself, it'll come through, it'll work, and you'll be effective.
Oh, Nikkole, you're on mute. Sorry.
Thanks for that. Thank you so much. Lisa so hit on it. And one of the things that I thought of that's right in the middle of what Lisa expressed was, I wish that maybe people would think or understand that if a woman is, sometimes, and men can be too, but emotion or passion doesn't mean weakness, doesn't mean, because I happen to be a very, folks who know me, I'm very emotive. I mean, joy, pain, sorrow, like I talk with my hands, I'm my mother's child. So if something matters to me, I do get my voice goes up, and I'm a naturally loud person. So I know that sometimes it's an acquired taste. I'm an acquired taste. When I'm dealing with people, I'm negotiating, and I get really like, what do you mean? But it's all in like love. People know, like, and we can get things done. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't have to feel like we should mirror most, 9 out of 10 men that we're kind of used to seeing at certain levels, right? It doesn't mean we're not level-headed and can't be fair and can't, it's sometimes, I think people fear being themselves for that reason. And I don't know how to not be that. So there are hurdles I've had to kind of climb, jump over, or just to ensure that folks knew that, where I was really coming from. Sometimes I've overcompensated for that before kind of settling into just the honest myself, but making sure that I'm kind of balancing other things out, if that makes sense.
Lisa, you touched on it I think there's this idea of like girl on girl crime in life, and it's a sort of very sort of known thing, and the workplace is no different. I had a boss once who told me that my wins were my wins and my losses were his losses, and that was still something that I carry with me today. And I thought it was such an interesting way of him looking at it, of like he was going to celebrate me when I needed to be, but also then had my back when things didn't go my way, or needed to be sort of cleaned up. So is there things that we can draw on from each other, and are there any sort of lessons you have sort of learned along the way that you've seen to sort of curb that girl on girl crime? Lisa, Heather, you're both shaking, you're both nodding your head.
I think that first of all, I think it's a very interesting question, and I think it's something that's not talked about that much. I think women treat women differently, sometimes with each other. I had a boss when I was at Lowe's, and this is 20 years ago. When I told her I was pregnant, she said to me, "That's a shame. You could have been head film buyer. Now you won't." That was, that's harsh. And she'd said it more than once to me. And it's like, women sometimes judge women differently. And I think that it's hard sometimes, because I don't know if it's a competitive thing or, and I think that a lot of us like to think it's all kumbaya, but it's not amongst women. And I think you have to really assert yourself as, once again, as I said earlier, you have to be who you are. And if who you are, isn't, not everybody's going to love you, men or women. So I think you just have to always have your antenna up as far as work and what's important. And it's like, when I think about that, and when I read your question, I thought about one of the first times I got to speak at CinemaCon, which was a big deal. I mean, like for me, I was president of Focus Features. It's like, it's a big deal to speak in front of that stage. And I got off the stage, and two women I know who, they'd worked with me for years and everything. And I got off the stage, I was standing next to my boss, and they looked at me, and I thought that they were going to say something positive to me, but instead they said, "Gee, your hair looks really long. Did you get extensions?" And I was really horrified by that, because it was kind of like, wow, I thought you guys were going to be like, yeah, cheer you on, that kind of thing. And my boss looked at me and just went, wow. But, it's one of those things where you have to just, you have to take it aside. You have to say, you know what, that's not important. I'm going to keep moving on, and just learn to treat people I'm not going to treat those people any differently in business. It's just, this is the way things are sometimes. And you just have to sort of learn to deal with people individually and have relationships. I think the most important thing that we can do in this industry is continue to have relationships, and not email relationships and not text relationships. I'm talking about one-on-one, talking on the phone, or doing Zoom. At least you see each other, right? Have those relationships with people, and just keep it as real as you possibly can, and just know who you are and be comfortable with it.
Yeah, I think I agree. I agree with everything that Lisa said. And I think that, Gurbani, you're right. It is a good question about girl on girl crime. And Lisa's right. It's not talked about very much. And I think it is largely motivated by a scarcity of women in certain industries or in certain positions. It's almost as though there's this unspoken rule, certainly used to be, and even still somewhat today, that there are only a certain number of us allowed at the table. And so the us's that are next to you, your right and your left, they're not people that you should foster and help. They're actually your competition. And so somehow you're going to need to step on one of them in order to get where you want to be. So I think that how we prevent that is just opening more doors and pulling out more seats for women at those tables. So it doesn't have to seem like it's this exclusive group, which also ties into your previous question about, is there anything we wish that people in the industry knew about women in positions of leadership? And I think the one thing that I wish that people knew is that women, not every woman certainly, but we're talking in sort of, archetypes. So women as a gender often need certain pushes to move themselves along. So whereas this is just documented research, whereas men, when they feel like they're 40 or 50% qualified for a role, they'll raise their hand and aggressively chase it. But if a woman feels like she's 70% qualified, she's a little hesitant because she doesn't want to put herself out there unless she's absolutely sure that she's got it. So if you want to have more women in positions of leadership, you as a leader yourself or your company needs to make a strategic effort to foster that and encourage women to take those stretch assignments and those stretch goals and to raise their hands for opportunities and to help put in infrastructure and systems and support that help them balance that work-life pull, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. But that's probably what I would say I wish the industry knew about women in positions of leadership.
Nikkole, do you have anything to add about sort of the girl on girl crime sort of idea that, I think Heather put it perfectly in that we think that they're our competition as opposed to our ally or our partner, or, we can work together to get somewhere, because I think you're right. We think that they're our competition, and that's kind of, I think, where it stems from.
I think you and Heather just summed it up perfectly. I mean, because and that goes across every segment that is not represented in those rooms, right? So women and all other ethnicities, right? It goes across. It's a common conversation amongst a number of us, because it does often feel like we're competing for a space of one versus, from top down, understanding that there's room for everyone, right? And so that we all win if each other are helping each other to, progress.
For sure. And I feel like I'm just going to take a quick pivot and we'll come. I mean, I think this is a great topic, but as a woman of color in the industry, I think I've struggled with the idea of being like the token, for lack of a better word. And I had someone once tell me that I checked a lot of boxes, and I was female, I was younger, I was of color, and I checked a lot of the boxes that people look out for. And I mean, I think it was meant as an endearing thing, but it was something that stuck with me even still today. So I guess Nikkole or Mabel, I don't know if you want to touch on what are some of the ways that you've treated sort of your own career or women around you, or just generally, maybe not just even women, just sort of inclusion in that way that feels the most authentic, because I think there's some ways of doing it that feel very inauthentic. And I'd love for you guys to touch on that.
Well, for me, I really try not to think of myself as any different, female or male. I just try to do the best job I can. I mean, I would love for us to not have to identify as, well, that's a girl boss, as opposed to a boss. I just am who I am. And when I talk to people, I treat them the same way. Treat them, the common thing of treat those the way you want to be treated. I mean, I've been lucky in that respect. I mean, you know, just to touch back a little bit on that conversation, I've been really blessed and lucky that I haven't had the kind of girl on girl crime, as it were. I mean, I've worked with Lisa for a number of years, and Lisa's fantastic. So she never hated on me. So I've been really lucky in that way. And, you know, Lisa being one of my role models, again, treat everyone with kindness. And I've been lucky enough to have that back to me.
Nikkole, is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I would just say that I think being a woman of color, my overall experience since very young, like middle school, I've almost my entire life been either one in a room of other, or very few, one of two or three in a room of other. Given that, I think what I tend to do, or what I always try to project, which is an extension of what Mabel was explaining, is always being inclusive. Like always being thoughtful about, you know, how others may feel in a space. But I also don't overcompensate and like over lean in. I just, at the end of the day, be open to all, always have an open door, always make sure folks know that I see and appreciate every one of them as individuals, ask how people are doing, keep, you know, just the common sense, you know, those, the core things that you, as a human being, that you're just hoping that also gets reflected to you. Again, treat others like Mabel said. And really, that's what I do.
Yeah, you do.
Heather or Lisa, is there anything sort of that you've done or that you've consciously seen about, you know, having that inclusive feel and it being authentic?
I think for me, you know, I started out probably earlier than these ladies did, and there were no women at the table when I started, you know, and you know, I was always a tomboy, you know, through most of my school days. So it was just something that for me, I was able to sort of just get along with the guys because I can talk sports with them and I can do. So it was, you know, it was one of those things where I just kind of blended in with them. But I see now that, you know, if you really want to be, you know, I think that inclusion is important overall for women and people of color. I think that as an industry, we need to really grow with that. But I think that it has to do with giving back and really, you know, going into the schools and educating people. If we want to really make this better, then we got to put our money where our mouth is and take the time and really spend time to make people understand that what we do is something that they can do and make them feel welcome, so that we really can become broader and more diverse. Because we talk a lot, but we don't do a lot, unfortunately, I find, in our industry. And I think it's time for us to do. And that starts with like going into high schools and talking. So for me, the way that I try to deal with it is I really want to try to talk to younger people and really get them involved and interested in what we do and know that they're welcome. Because I think that's the problem that we have in our industry. You know, we talk about, like you just said, you talked about being token. It's like that shouldn't be anymore. What we've experienced, what I experienced when I was younger, it shouldn't be that way. But it's not going to not happen by us not actually taking actions to make it better. You know, and I think that's really the most important step in our industry to making everyone feel more welcome.
Yeah, I think Lisa makes a really good point. I think that I did something similar at the very earlier on when I first joined the industry. I sort of had this misconception that in order to advance and be successful, I was going to need to blend in. So if I'm one of very few women in a room, just, you know, be more male, exhibit more male characteristics, right? Be less female and blend. And then over time, as you get your footing and you build your confidence, I think you look around and what you realize is the industry doesn't need more of the same. And you're doing the industry and yourself a disservice by trying to, you know, pretend that you're something you're not, or to diminish what makes you unique. So instead, be authentic, be yourself, be unique, which is exactly what Nikkole was saying earlier, and encourage other people to do the same, so that that uniqueness isn't pushed out, it's welcomed in. Try to find it and try to foster it.
For sure. And Lisa, I think you actually said something that sort of triggered me of, there are jobs, I think, in our industry that we don't even know, or that I didn't know existed. When I was in school, when I was, I went to film school, and I didn't know that the job I have today even existed. And in fairness, my job has evolved in a way that, my company or Cineplex didn't have what I do today before I came along. I sort of, molded it. And sure, the film buying part of my job is has been around for a very long time, but that's one part of what I do. And so I think there are so many jobs in our industry just generally, but if we're talking about film, obviously, are there other ways? Obviously we can talk about that, but are there other tangible things that you've done for your own staff for them to broaden their horizons, or again, jobs that don't exist today are going to exist in 5 years, 10 years, and so on? As Lisa specifically, or anybody else, obviously.
Pre-COVID, we really started to try to do that more. We have a program that we do in our office for Focus for Women, and we would do lunches, and we still do lunch and learns, which I think is really, really good. And I actually try to participate in all the lunch and learns, because there's a lot of things to learn, even for me. I've been in the industry for a long time, but I still have a lot that there is that I can find out. So I try to participate in all of those. And, I think that those types of activities for the company that you open up to everybody are really, really good ideas. One of the things that Universal also did during COVID was that they took all of the executive leaders and they basically had a day where it was almost like when you were in high school, when you got to do sort of your job, your job search. They actually had people sign up, and we got to spend 10 minutes with each person, explain what we did, explain what we did in our department, what kind of jobs there were, what kind of opportunities there were. They could ask us questions, and those types of things are really good. And I'm lucky that I work at a company that really, really, Universal really does try to get out as much knowledge as they possibly can about the whole company and the opportunities that are there. I think that is something that we can do. And the other thing that I really would like to do, and it's something that I was talking to my boss Cujo about, we couldn't do it obviously during COVID, but we're talking about it before that, which is go to the high schools and go to, when they do their days, their career days, let's get a reel together. Let's show them, we do all these reels for CinemaCon and stuff, which is great. But we can also do that for young people and really show them what we do and explain to them what the opportunities are and that they're welcome. I think that's the biggest thing. I don't think people think that they're welcome in the industry. As you know, in our industry, for many years, it wasn't really what you knew, it's who you knew or who your dad was, or, and it's like that kind of, there was no growth. And so you just basically had people doing the same things over and over and over again, to the point where, you kind of become dinosaurs. And it's like, it's time for us to really bring in young people so that they can enlighten us as to, the future of cinema is in their hands, and we need to have them be part of it. And I think the only way that you can do it is to really go out to those young people and explain to them what we can do. And I'd be happy to take time, and go to high schools and talk to kids and really just explain to them that there are opportunities here, and that, it isn't just for people whose dads were in the industry. It is for everybody. I didn't have anybody in the industry that I knew. I just kind of fell into it, worked, and I was lucky enough to work with people like Travis Reed and Ted Mundorf, who recognized that I had some ability to be able to do the job. But not everybody has that. So, it's up to us, and it's up to us as women to welcome everyone into our industry and to explain to them that there are opportunities for them and that we want them there.
Yeah, I love the idea of like an internal job fair almost. Like, I love that Universal did that, of like this internal job fair of like, I assume you had to sign up and you could pick who you spoke to, or even if you didn't, even if it was like a random match. I love that idea. Nikkole or Heather, Mabel, were there other sort of areas that you feel like we can sort of look forward?
I would just throw out one of the things, probably so I've been with AMC 12 and a half years. But when I first started, probably a year in, I was just so fascinated as I learned the scope of every other exhibitor and understood what I, to myself, represented as an African-American female on, at the time, like the buying team. So I was on panels, like I probably like 20 different charities. I would just volunteer myself to be, not only on like entertainment related panels, but a bunch of other panels where, I could talk to youth and chat with them about other opportunities. And even those, everything from like Ghetto Film School and, some other, other folks, because they don't understand that there's so many sexy things behind the camera, like other than being on the front or, directing. But internally at our headquarters at the Theater Support Center, they do also have internally, they'll have speakers, and we have a women's council who often invited people. This was all pre-COVID as well. And these days we're looking at other opportunities where people don't have to physically go somewhere to kind of share other, highlight not necessarily roles, but the skill sets, so that if people are interested in learning more around like how to do Excel sheets or, other areas of the business, we often put together small meetings around those.
And Heather, as the first female president of Will Rogers, which is obviously, a great undertaking, I think, for you. And speaking as a Film Row board member and obviously a younger part of the younger generation, are there things that you feel like there are tangible changes that you can make? Again, I think the idea of education and getting, more people understanding what we actually do, because I think Lisa and Nikkole said it perfectly. Like, I think people think that you have to come to the movies and either you watch a movie or you're a director, and like those are the only jobs, or you pop popcorn or something. And so are there things that you think that within the charity sector that you're looking forward to expanding out or changing or anything like that?
Yes, absolutely. So we've been having a lot of conversations about what the future direction of Will Rogers is, because the core of what we do is very important, but we also want to revamp some things so that we continue to make notable changes and improvements in the industry. We want to help be a driving force for the long-term health of the industry. And I think that just as we've been alluding to over the course of this entire panel, it comes from a couple of things. Number one is creating the understanding amongst the larger community that the film industry has a strong future, and it's a great place to work and a great place to be for everyone. And these are the opportunities available, and this is how you get in. And so number one is recruiting talent from outside, and recruiting talent right now is like the buzzword for every company in every industry. But recruiting talent to come in and have the best and brightest young people helping to drive and determine the future of the industry. And then secondarily, the people that we have here, it's helping to foster that growth and shine a light on opportunities and promote from within and put the right people in the right positions. And so we talk about, from a charitable organization that is connected to exhibitors and distributors and vendor partners, how can we get people's interests and what they want to do with their career? Because as a good leader, you should be having conversations with your team about what are your career aspirations, what interests you. This is what I see your skill sets being. I think they could be applied really well here, here, and here. So you try to help foster those conversations, because some people think of it really well on their own, and some people need a little guidance when it comes to that. So how can we, as a broader organization with multiple touch points, help provide some of those resources and guidance to educate people about what other opportunities are available within our own industry, and also, equally importantly, help them meet the right people? Because sometimes, to Lisa's point, it's not just what you know, it's who you know. So, you could be a fantastic fit for a position in a company that you'd love to work for. You have no idea that it's open. And so that requires connecting people with opportunities. So there are a number of conversations that we're having, but I think that Will Rogers is in for some really exciting developments in the next 3 to 5 years. And I'm just thrilled to be part of it, because it's going to take a small army to accomplish.
We're very excited to have you at the helm of that. So I think as we talk about sort of again, new opportunities and new generations coming in and educating them, I think we've all struggled with, or I think everyone struggled with, the old style of working versus the new style of working, and whether that be physically as we come out of COVID, and the purists of wanting to be back in the office, people who have a more work-life balance now, which we'll get a little bit more into. But we can't really lead into whatever this new world is without the knowledge and base of that quote unquote old world. And so how do you think we best position ourselves, your teams, you individually, to straddle both of those work styles? or even just both of those approaches to what we all do?
That's an interesting question. I notice here on the thing, I'm the only one in the office.
There you go. And I was going to say, and the other 4 of us are at home.
Sure, Mabel. This could be my office, Mabel. You don't know.
That's true.
I'm pretty sure I know it's not your office, Lisa. I'm just saying, ready. But I do think it's important to be nimble and flexible with schedules. As we went through COVID, there was a rebalancing, I think, in all our lives of what's important, right? Family became health, like those connections became so important to every one of us. So it's finding that balance and that flexibility with your staff. Also the trust that they're getting stuff done. I trust my staff immensely and I know they're capable. So trust, flexibility, I think those are two important keywords.
Yeah, I think Mabel's 100% correct. And when I was head film buyer, and Mabel knows this, when I was head film buyer at Landmark, I was in Texas. I was in Dallas. I worked from Texas for most of the time. I worked from my house. So, there's a certain discipline to working from your house. There's also a certain amount of you work 24 hours a day when you're from your house. And that's not always a good thing because you don't turn it off. And I've always had an issue with that. And people joked with me that I'd be answering emails at 2 o'clock in the morning. Which I try not to do now, but it is something that you really have to deal with on a personal level. And then I think that you need to know your staff. Everybody's different, a lot of people, if they get their work done, that's the key, and everybody has a different situation personally now with COVID. It's changed a lot of things. There's a lot of things that have changed. We have to think about it as we go forward. Our company and focus in general is basically taking the view that right now we're going to start sort of taking baby steps back into the office again, and then we're going to sort of reanalyze everything, and then we're going to figure out what's best for each department. Every department has a different need to be in the office. People who are doing AV, people who are doing creative, they probably need to be in a little bit more than some of the other folks can. So we're dealing with it, and I think that it's so far so good. And I have to say, seeing people again and being in the office again is really nice. And it feels really good to see everybody. We've been lucky enough to do some screenings and things like that. And we go in the office for that. I don't think, and I think this is a good thing. I think the days of getting in at 8 o'clock in the morning and leaving at 10 o'clock at night are probably in the rearview mirror for most of us at this point. And I think that's a good thing. And if we've learned anything from this, is that maybe there is a way to balance all of this, home life, work, a little better than what we were doing before.
Yeah, and I think that personal connection is key. I mean, you talked about it earlier, Lisa touched on it earlier, of like that actual connection and having relationships with people. And it's not just an email relationship, it's actually talking to somebody or going to their office. Mm-hmm. My boss jokes that I was very hesitant to go back into the office. I went back to the office for the first time this week on Monday for bookings, and he made fun that I really didn't want to go. But, once I was there, I realized that that actual connection and the way, and you can actually talk to somebody and just, hear somebody down the hallway and all of that, I think is obviously really key. So, as we come out of that balance needs to be there. And I kind of personally hate the idea of like the new normal, because I think women generally have been facing barriers and juggling priorities for centuries. And so for us to say that it's new for them, I think, or for us, I think is a bit flawed. But what makes now so different, COVID aside, obviously, but I think we're also entering this new era of the way that we're connected to people. And so are there things in your career that you've sort of set yourself up to handle the working realities of today, or advice for people who are looking to broaden their scope? And again, I throw to maybe Heather or Mabel, or obviously Nikkole or Lisa, of course.
Sure. Yeah, I think so the new versus the old and the blur, that's something that we talk about a lot, because you're right. Women, we talk about work-life balance and work-life integration and, pick your buzzword, but it all refers to the process of the tension that you feel when you are leaning into one area of your life and you feel like it's pulling from the other. And that tension became exacerbated for a lot of people throughout COVID, especially women, because the lines between their work-life balance were completely obliterated. And you were working from home while caring for your children who were schooling from home and trying to do it took away a lot of the lines of definition. And I think that ended up being good for some people, and they felt like that finally freed them up to be more efficient with their time. And I think some people also really struggled with that. So when we talk about the new, about how we go forward, I think Lisa's right. I think that we are getting away from, thankfully, this idea that your productivity is measured by the amount of time you spend sitting at your desk, because that used to be how it was thought of. And that hurt a number of people, but women, I think in particular, because it is still the case that most of the family labor is allocated toward women. It's just, in the majority of instances, that's the reality of it. So that's a pull between the amount of hours you can sit at your desk. Women in particular need that flexibility, and younger people that we're talking about trying to attract into our industry, they want it. We're not, younger generations that can pick where they want to go work and what industry they want to stake their careers in. They don't want jobs where their productivity is measured by them being always accessible, never being able to shut off, having to be in the office for a certain number of hours. So as stressful and as difficult as the COVID environment was for many people to navigate, I think it forced about some employer mentality changes that are going to have long-lasting impacts that in the long run are going to be good for the industry. But I'd be very interested in what Mabel has to say about it with the team that she manages.
Well, in general, I'm gonna say there's absolutely nothing wrong with taking a break. Walk around the building. I mean, self-care is important, and I stress that. In fact, I walk around 3 o'clock every day, punch the air a little bit outside. That's really important to me. Take time for yourself. We have to prioritize. I mean, I think everyone here on this panel I don't think anybody will ever say you guys are not hard workers. That's not in question. We just need to take back those, reorder those priorities. Family is important. We are important, work's important. And I think finding that balance, and making time for yourself is vital to succeed, really.
Is there any, Heather, you touched on before of like the time that was spent in the office was what was so important. And I've heard so many stories of my male colleagues or bosses of them starting out their career and them being the last one at their desk. And so when someone else or their boss was still there and they're like, you want to go grab a drink, they would go grab a drink because they were the ones that were still at their desk at 8, 9 o'clock at night, working away or whatever. And that's how they then, made those connections with those higher ups, because they were the only ones left in the office. And I think that was measured of how much time you actually spent. Now that we know that shift is going to happen, how can we, or what advice do you have, and this is sort of an open-ended question for everybody, but what advice do you have to replicate that? Because that is still going to be important, as much as we believe that it's not just about who you know, but those relationships have to be fostered somehow. And how do you foresee those relationships changing?
I think that for younger people, and I'm lucky working at Focus, we have a lot of great, really talented young people. And I have to say the women in our office, the young women in our office are really impressive. And we try, and I think we need to do it more. You need to have regular meetings, whether they're, for us, a lot of times it's creative meetings because we're working on marketing campaigns. I think we need to find ways to make people be able to sort of speak up in those meetings more and make their ideas known, because they're smart, they're intelligent, they have a lot of things to share. A lot of us, including myself, are we have no problem sort of giving our opinions and stuff, but I realize that sometimes that's intimidating. So I think we have to make sure that we're listening to these people and giving young people and everyone in the office the opportunity to sort of give what they, to tell us what they think we should be doing better, and to give their ideas, and feel free to give their creative ideas during the regular operating hours. You shouldn't have to go out for drinks with somebody to be able to, and believe me, that existed when I started out. You'd stay until 9 o'clock at night, and who's ever left would go to Houlihan's, and that was not necessarily the greatest way to sort of connect with people. You should be able to do that. but it happened, and that's just the way it was, and it still happens to this day. You'll still see it, but I don't think that that's the best way to really get talented people to give you their ideas or to listen to them more. I think you need to do it during regular operating hours and encourage people that life is more than work, and that you should be able to get your work done at 9 to 5 or 9 to 6 or whatever it may be. And that going home is a good thing. It's not like, wow, we're going to shame that person. They went home. Oh, yeah. That shouldn't be the way that it is. We should be able to give people the opportunities to sort of shine a light on them, in regular ways, and even have weekly meetings that are just creative meetings or whatever they might be, so that people can give their ideas and that they feel free to do that, and to give them their time to do presentations or whatever they need to do. But if it should be done during regular hours, and those relationships should be carved that way, not, the old fashioned way. It's not healthy. It's just not a healthy thing to do.
I agree with that. And kind of expressing that flexibility word along with the regular meetings. Because I do feel like being flexible in terms of like when you're speaking on one-on-ones, or when you're chatting and you just ask someone how they're doing, and our emotional intelligence needs to kick in more often. But as far as like the meetings, I do have like one-on-ones with with all of my direct reports, but then I oversee 3 business units. So once a month, and maybe that should happen more often, but once a month, I invite all 3 groups onto one call to share with each other what's going on, or just to kind of say, hey, I might need some help here, or ask me whatever questions. So I kind of start with an update about things I know that they may not, right? And then I kind of just allow kind of a freestyle. And I do feel like that tends to invite people to also reach out to me separately, because that's happened, post those meetings to share other thoughts or ideas. So I do think the access to us, or reminding them that we're open and that we want to hear from them, and just invite that dialogue is important.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think that also as we go, so it's just starting to emerge. So Gurbani, just like you said, it was your first day back in the office this week. As we move down that path, because old habits die hard. So some companies will transition to a full-time in the office, work schedule, and some will be permanently remote or a hybrid. But when we are spending more time in the office, it's going to be increasingly important not to revert back to that mentality where the first one to leave must be the least hard worker, or the last one to arrive must be, the one who's least dedicated. We can't let those antiquated, ingrained thought patterns, govern how we evaluate people's performance, because it's too hindering for too many of the people who work for us and the people who we're trying to attract to the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I was in for 2 days this week, and even by the end of day 2, I was like, okay, I remember what this was like. I think at the beginning of COVID, we all really had to adjust to that at-home life, and then it's just, after a little while, we'll obviously adjust to that in-person life all over again. It's just getting used to it, and we spent 2.5 years obviously not. Mabel, I assume you've been going into the office more. Are there things that you've noticed in people's work styles and being in the office as often as you are, that you think that are things that are really going to stick, or that you hope stick as we come out of this world?
Sorry, my camera went out momentarily. No, I don't know if there's anything different. I think people are finding that when we do get together, they're missing, I think, the collaborative effort that we had pre-COVID, right? And just getting back into that, which is so important. We forget that we're social beings, and it's really cool to be able to walk over to someone's office and just ask a question or something like that. So I can see people, getting just more acclimated and excited to be with other people instead of, on these Zoom calls, which are nice. It's nice to see you guys, but I'd rather sit face to face with you. So sure. That's something in general I just like to stress, that I think it's so important to have these connections and these one-on-one times and just being social. I mean, this is what our industry is. I don't like, if you're gonna, you can't get, when you email someone, you can't understand. Sometimes tone is misinterpreted or other things are misinterpreted, and that's just not the way to go. So again, having these one-on-one or in a group meetings, I think it's just, I like having them so much more. And the other thing too, I also like having to go home. When you leave work's here. When I go home, I mean, there's a little bit of work, but not as much as like, what it used to be, which is where you lived at work, which I have an outlet now. I have an hour commute, sing in the car. It's, these releases that you get to have, which, I think is important too. Just part of the self-care and just taking care of yourself.
Lisa, do you foresee that changing? I feel like I can tell that you're sitting at your dining table. And so that feeling of sitting at your dining table and then always having your computer out and always having that tie to your computer. I know you worked, I mean, at the beginning of your career remotely, so you're at least probably have more, you probably were better at this than most of us were at the beginning, at least. Do you feel like you miss that break?
Yes. I mean, my issue is more of, I never turn my work off, which is really awful. And I think that that's bad, in general. And I think a lot of women have a tendency to do that. And I don't know if it's overcompensation or what it is, but also, just the nature of the job that we're in. We deal with people in different time zones. We're dealing with filmmakers very often in Europe. So I don't ever want to, I remember when we were releasing last night in Soho, Edgar Wright, who literally doesn't sleep at all, I don't think, was emailing me all times of the day and night, and I just kept answering him because, like, why wouldn't you answer Edgar Wright immediately, right? So, I do think that there's, I do miss going I have to say, I was in the office yesterday and I spent most of the day just walking around talking to everybody because I hadn't seen them in person in a long time. And it was just nice. And it was freeing because we've all been COVID tested to death. So we all felt very comfortable giving each other hugs. And I had seen our head of production, whom I literally hadn't seen in person in 2 years. And I love him. And it was just nice to sit with him and talk to him in person. And I missed that, and we caught up on projects that we probably would not have done if we hadn't seen each other. So there's a lot to be said for that personal time of, going into the office. And just like Mabel said, she has a pretty long commute. And, for me, I probably was listening to Pearl Jam radio. Mabel, I know you find that shocking. It goes between U2 and Pearl Jam. But honestly, listening to U2 and Pearl Jam for, a half an hour each way is a good thing for my soul. So I do miss that, One of the bigger ties I have to my house is my dogs. My dogs have gotten totally spoiled in COVID. And now when I leave for 5 minutes, it's as if I left for 5 years. And so I know, and it's not just me. It's funny because Donna Langley was talking to me about this on one of our corporate calls. And she's like, I don't know. I don't think the dogs will agree with me going back in the office. And it's like, all of us have sort of gotten used to it. So it's just breaking the habit, in some ways. But I've been lucky enough that even during the whole COVID thing, we would go to screenings and things. So I've been getting in and out, and it's really about, trying to be more disciplined and just knowing that, you have to take time where you turn the computer off, you take the phone and you go away. It's just like, in regular life, you say it to your kids, no phones at the table, things like that. You have to take time where you're away from your devices, where you're away from your job. I think that we're all going to be better at it. I'm very optimistic about that. I really think that we've all learned a lot, and I think we're all going to be better at it as we get back into the workforce again.
Well, I will say, I mean, if Secret Life of Pets taught us anything, your dogs need time away from you because they have things to do during the day. It's my universal plug.
I'd like to think that. I really would.
Yeah, they need some time. It's like also the last few years, all of our shoes thought we all died. So it's exciting to put shoes on and go actually outside. All of my shoes probably think I'm dead.
It's true.
As we look forward or look ahead to our industry and how it's changing and all of the challenges that we're facing, and I won't go through all of them, but what are some things that you believe that, build confidence or resilience in building your own career, but then also setting up, like, sort of how do we inspire that next generation and that building that confidence in our industry as a whole, whether it be, a female or not, I suppose.
I think the first thing is that we have to make movies that are worthy of people going into theaters. And I think that's like where I start is let's put our money where our
I was going to
mouth
say, I
is.
like that answer. I'm with Nikkole. I think
Yeah, I mean,
Mabel, you
that's-
unfortunately have an unfair or disadvantage, Lisa, being the only distributor on here, but we all agree.
No, it's
Pressure's
true
on
though.
you,
I mean,
Lisa.
you have to make the content that's worthy for folks to put into theaters. And I think that, we're very, at Focus and Cujo is our boss, and Donna Langley supports us big time. Brian Roberts was with us at the Academy Awards because he was so proud of what we had done with Belfast. So it shows you that we have support from everywhere. Jeff Shell is very supportive of us. So this year we'll probably release 14 movies, and next year we'll do another 14. And those movies are varying levels. They're bigger budgets like Downton Abbey. They're emerging directors like Robert Eggers. But we're going to be doing, a lot, and we're going to just keep coming to you guys to play our movies and to play them theatrically because we believe in it, and we're still going to keep doing that. So that's number one to me, is to make that theatrical experience something that people want to go see. And then I think that on the exhibition side, I do think that exhibition has to think about what are people reacting to? What do they want to do? What makes them go to the theaters? Why is the Dolby Theater at Century City always packed all the time? Is that because that's not an anomaly? They love Dolby Cinema. They love large format. They love going to the Alamo Drafthouse and being able to, get food and drinks and be treated special. And they have content that no one else has. That's important. It's important. They have relationships with directors. At the Landmark, you can go get a Q&A. You can go see, you can see Paul Thomas Anderson in a 70mm print of Licorice Pizza. That's a big freaking deal. So, I mean, those are the things that have to be thought about. And I also think that people need to take a breath and stop looking at the box office press that keeps saying, oh, theatrical is over. Oh, the Oscars, the streamer won. It's all over. Nobody's going to do the campaigns they used to. I'm sorry, but that's complete and total bullshit. And it's just a way for people to, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit, I
think we all agree as the exhibitors on the call. I think we all agree with what you're saying. No,
Lisa is playing to her audience right now, big time. We are all cheering on Lisa Bunnell.
But actually, I'm not playing to the audience because it's who I am, because it's true. This is what I say. I really believe this. I don't just say it because it's like, I hate that. I think it's wrong. And I think that, the fact that the box office press, it's nice clickbait to say that stuff. But I can tell you that Focus Features will be doing the same Oscar campaigns that they used to. If we can go back and do some of the platforms that we used to, we'll go back and do that. We're not going to change the industry. We're not looking to do that. In fact, we'd like to, I know personally, I have a couple movies in the fall that I probably am going to go a little backwards on as far as release plans go and how I used to do things. And I mean that. So I don't think that we have to think it's the demise of the industry. I think there's a lot of life in the industry, and I think there's a lot of life for young people in the industry, because I think that we want your input. We want to be better. We don't want to just go back and be dinosaurs again. But, you can take some of the old and a lot of the new, put it together and create something that's a lot better than it was before. And I really believe that. I do. I honestly believe that. That's why I keep going.
Heather, do you have anything to add of just sort of the comments as your day 4 of Alamo Drafthouse? Tell us all the secrets.
Right. I'm not going to lie to you. I got so wrapped up in Lisa's whole thing that I completely forgot what your question was.
I don't remember the question either.
No, give me like a 2-second recap of your question.
It's just about building confidence in our industry and in our careers. Sort of the advice you have to the younger generation of building that up.
Yeah. So I think that really, honestly, the most effective way that we can build confidence, not just in ourselves, but also for the people that are watching us, is to put ourselves deliberately into situations that are uncomfortable and to take risks. That's how you build confidence, and that's how you build resilience. So go for those stretch goals. Go after the positions that you're not quite sure you got, but that you really want to take a shot at, and encourage other people to do the same. Because every time you stretch and get yourself into a position where you're just so uncomfortable, and then you see yourself succeed, it builds your confidence for the next thing. And that's how you ladder up your career. And that's what other people see as well. So, it's very comfortable to stay in our safety zone, both personally, professionally, as a company, but confidence and resilience is built through stretching, and that's uncomfortable. So get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
I like that. I was gonna say, these kinds of things, I mean, I love having these conversations, but I don't want to know how many people are watching, because that part was the uncomfortable part for me, of how many people are actually watching us right now. But I need to wrap this up, and I could probably talk to you all for hours, but if you could give one piece of advice, sort of a couple lines or a couple sentences, if you could give a piece of advice to your younger self, whether it was starting out in the industry or even just like a year ago, what would that piece of advice be? And I would throw to, or give you guys all a second to think about what that piece of advice would be. But while you think about it, I wanted to thank everybody for joining us. I think this was an amazing panel. I know I benefited greatly from our discussion. I'm really excited to see what all of us do next. But Heather, do you want to start?
Okay, so yes, I have this. My piece of advice to my younger self would be, don't make the mistake of thinking that you have to be perfect in order to be successful. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to not know everything. It's okay to fail. Don't let the fear of all of those things hold you back from really putting yourself out there. You don't have to be perfect to be successful.
I like that. I love that. Lisa, do you have a piece of advice for your younger self?
Yeah, and I think it's sort of life advice, which is life is not a dress rehearsal, which my mother used to tell me, and she was right. Appreciate every day that you have in general, and do the best you can every day, and also just understand that you can make a difference every day. And if you make a mistake yesterday, you can't do anything about the past. You can only do it one day at a time, one step at a time. Get up every day and just do the best job you can. And the next day the sun will come out and you'll do it again. So just appreciate the position that you're in and do the best you can with it.
Nikkole?
So without repeating a couple of the others that were said,
I know I was gonna say great piece of advice from everybody, but
I would probably just add that to learn your strengths and lean into them, because as you react or listen to people, if you really listen along the path, people are telling you what's really good about you. You start to understand what works, even in their actions or the way they react. So understanding what works and leaning into those skills are really important.
Mabel, do you have a piece of advice for your younger self?
Yeah, just a little bit to build on what Heather said. Don't be afraid of criticism. Those are learning moments. And, your first reaction may be to brush them off or, not listen. But again, you got to build on those to make yourself, better.
I think that's actually a great point. I was gonna say, just touching on Nikkole, of learn what you're good at. I think we all sometimes get criticism and then only keep that criticism, and then we try and only fix those things, but really trying to figure out, there are things that we're all good at too. And probably in all of our conversations where we've been criticized, we've also been praised in that same sentence, and we don't pay attention to the other. Well, Edgar Wright is calling Lisa, so we could probably wrap this up. I want to see if there's any questions for everybody. Marianne, I don't know if you want to pop in, and I know that there's been a flurry of questions, so I'm going to throw to you.
Hi, everyone. Ladies, such a great discussion. We have a couple questions I hope you have time for. Somebody asked, what changes have you implemented within your company to help women feel more inclusive? How do you motivate and build up the people within your company? Nikkole?
I would say on occasion, on occasion I do some mentoring. There's a few women within the organization that reach out based on the fact that we've crossed each other's paths and just said hello in a certain way. They feel more invited and they decide they want to have a chat. So I've kind of taken on a few, regular conversations with some women within the organization. Other than that, I just focus on being transparent with the folks that I engage with regularly. Most of that is on my team. but I'm very, I like to be as candid as I can be, short of highly confidential information that I can't share from, a certain point, but I just try and make sure that folks are empowered with the information that they need to remain confident, not only in the organization, but in their own roles, and encourage them, much like Heather explained, around just taking the chances, because it took that for me too, like raising my hand around things that were very uncomfortable. And trust me, I mean, I've fallen, I've gotten up, I've fallen, I crawled, I got up again, and it's all been worth it.
Exactly. Great pieces of advice, all of you. Quickly, have any of you had a female boss versus your male boss? What are the pros and cons? I don't think we talked about that.
I have had a female boss, I've had male bosses, and unfortunately, I would have to say that my male bosses were much better to me than my female bosses were. So it's just the way it was. It was just, unfortunately. But I do think it depends. I mean, Donna Langley is not my, I don't directly report to her, but she's fantastic. And I absolutely, if there was ever anybody that I would want to emulate, it's Donna, because she's unbelievable. So that's fantastic. But in my career, especially because of the people, it just happened to be the way that it was. But I've had some fantastic male mentors. I was very, very lucky to be able to have, really good Travis Reed, Ted Mundorf, and my husband was always, Steve has always been unbelievably supportive of me, and not only as in a relationship, but also in business. So I've actually been very lucky to have a lot of really good male role models for myself.
Nice. Thank you. Another one. For many women, there's often a need to prove their worth by working harder and longer hours. How do you self-advocate, and what suggestions do you have for young professionals to self-advocate who are trying to advance their careers? Heather?
Yes. So yes, this exact issue has tripped me up before. In particular, so after I had my second baby, so I had one like toddler and one infant, and I was in a role at that time where it was very much like the longer you were at your desk, the more, productive you must be. And if you were the last one in or the first one to leave, that was a problem. And it became a discussion between my boss and I, where he basically let me know that there was a perception amongst people that, I was not putting in as much effort because I wasn't there the same number of hours. And I was early on in my career at that point, and that would have been a very pivotal moment for me to make a very good strategic decision and be very impactful to others. And instead, I handled it very poorly, and I blew up, kind of in a how dare you fashion, right? Just full on anger. And afterwards, I got some coaching from one of my female mentors, and she said, I completely understand your anger about that, the fact that perception even exists. You're right to be angry about it, but a better way to handle it would have been to stay calm and say, at different seasons in people's lives, they need to do different things in order to get their work done. So are you still happy with the quality of the work that I'm putting in? I would have gotten a resounding yes on that. Then the next response would have been, well, in order to drop my kids off in time at daycare and pick them up on time, I need to come in at this time and leave at this time. So what can we do to, make this work for everyone involved? So I should have taken a much more well thought out, calm, measured approach, and not necessarily led with inflammatory anger, even if it were justified, because that's not helpful toward paving the way for other working moms with small kids that are going to face that same thing in the future. So, trying to just stay calm, look at it from all perspectives, and then proactively have those conversations if you can about what you need in terms of flexibility in your working environment. And that's where we can all come in and I think be helpful as far as fostering working environments that are more open to having those discussions, where women who are coming off maternity leave can say, I'm sleeping 5 hours a night. I need this amount of flexibility in order to still bring my best for the team, or something like that.
And
you.
I just want to add 100% be proactive. I have to say that I've had situations like that, and I've gone to, and I've said, hey, this is the situation with my son this week. And if you tell somebody that, then and they understand it and they agree, then when somebody else criticizes it, they already have the answer. They go, you know what? Heather told me that she has to do X, Y, or Z, and it's fine. She's getting her work done. As long as she gets her work done, none of your business. And I think that's the best way to handle it. I have never had, anytime I've ever had to talk to a boss, female, male, and told them that, it's been very, very, they've been receptive and appreciative, and it's always worked out.
Yeah. And had I known Lisa and had a relationship with her at the time, I would have relied on her wisdom, because at that point in time that I was referring to, I was still operating under the misconception that I will be faulted or penalized if people see that my home life is impacting my work. If I'm going to be one of the guys, I can't have my kids, making me work truncated working hours, which, in hindsight, as a mature woman, it's an asinine idea that your small children are not going to impede your work. It's dumb. So I know it's dumb now. I tell everybody else it's dumb.
But you don't think that way because you're worried about it. But I think the good thing is now you're starting to see men do it, which I think is great. I'm
absolutely great. Paternity leave all the way.
Yep. You're starting to see that, and I think it's good.
Yeah, it's excellent.
Canada has a full year paternity leave if you want to take it, and it is like completely flipping the gender role, which I think is really great to see.
Yeah.
Wow.
But it's also important to talk to other women to get that advice, so you're not making the same mistake, or you're learning from what they went through in order to be able to advocate and be like, this is what I need in order to do, the best job for you. So, one more question. What boundaries have you set in the workplace, and how do you navigate that when it's met with a push? Mabel?
What boundaries have I set? Well, this kind of just builds on the stuff we've talked about, making time for yourself. I mean, I get my work done at a set time. It doesn't mean that I'm not responding to emergencies or something that may come up. But when I'm at home, I need to be at home and focused on that other important part of my life, my family and myself. So I think it's important, again, to remember that it's okay to take time for yourself and what's important.
Exactly. All right, ladies, thank you so much for being here. This was great. I'll give it back to you, Gurbani, if you want to finish with any parting words.
I just wanted to thank everyone for tuning in, obviously, and thank you to Heather, Lisa, Nikkole, Mabel. This was like I learned, I think, more probably than everybody. So I really appreciate you having this conversation with all of us. And I just want to throw to Shelly. I know she has some film row words as well. So thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you, ladies. It was great. I mean, Nikkole, Mabel, Lisa, Heather, Gurbani. Like, I have my notes over here that I'm taking for myself as a leader in my company. So I'm getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. It's okay for me to make a mistake. Every day I can make a difference. Learn from my strengths and would you say learn your strengths and lean into it, and don't be afraid of criticism. Like, those were all great points that I will continue to take with me when I'm leading like a boss. So again, thank you. You guys did so great. Film Row Lead will have another speaker series coming up in June. So everyone be on the lookout for that. We appreciate everyone for tuning into the speaker series. And again, thank you and have a good evening.
Thanks for having us. Thank you so much.
Yes, Mabel.
Yeah. Nice hat, Mabel.
Yes, Mabel.
I just want to thank you, Gurbani and Shelly and Mariana and Heather and Nikkole and Lisa. You guys were amazing. I learned stuff.
I did too. I have my own notes.
You guys are awesome.
Let's get together again soon.
Yes.
Hopefully the next time will be in person.
In person, yes, definitely.
Absolutely.
Yes. All right. Thank you, guys.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Ciao.
Everyone.
Bye.